Something very strange is happening with the NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and the National Weather Service, who sits under them. Donald Trump made cuts to the NOAA and its organizations that sit under them in his first term, and he's making massive cuts in his second term. This says that following the creation of DOGE in January of 2025, major changes occurred at the NOAA, including hundreds of employees being terminated, dozens of federal contracts and leases being terminated, and the enactment of executive orders which affected the operations of NOAA. Enactment of executive orders which affected the operations of NOAA. The operations of the National Weather Service were affected, with several offices stopping weather balloon launches, and NOAA databases and websites went offline. It says the National Weather Service was also the target of domestic terrorism threats for conspiracy theories regarding weaponizing the weather. So the people who are weaponizing the weather aren't the terrorists, but the people trying to find out about it and spread the word are the terrorists. Got it. The NOAA is managed at the highest levels by the Merchant Navy, commissioned officers who are military officers, commanders, that report to the executive branch. And those Navy commissioned officers were not fired. The president or the executive branch cannot directly fire the U.S. Navy commanders. U.S. military officers, including Navy commanders, can only be dismissed from service by a general court-martial or in wartime by the president. So they're still there at the NOAA. And these commanders are over civilians who are employed by the NOAA and the National Weather Service, who sits under them. So the Merchant Navy was established during World War I as British merchant shipping fleets. And this just shows the British propaganda during World War II, highlighting the role of Britain's merchant navy in sustaining the Allied war effort. The following is a partial list of the merchant navies and their military, with their military structure based on the UK Merchant Navy. Australia, Canada, Britain, of course, Czech Republic, Greece, India, New Zealand, Pakistan, Poland, Switzerland, and the U.S. So Merchant Navy law is Admiralty and Maritime Law. They're the body that governs. So let's look at it a little more. Admiralty Law. This lists the history of it. And at the very top, it's based on the Code of Hammurabi. And what's that? The Code of Hammurabi is a Babylonian legal text composed during 1755 BC, written in the Old Babylonian dialect of Akkadian by Hammurabi, 6th king of the first dynasty of Babylon. Sometimes I love doing this when I find something like this. I want to bust these people, so forgive me if I'm obsessed, but it's way better than standing around scratching your head wondering what's going on, I'll tell you that. The Code of Hammurabi, which Admiralty Law is based on and listed first in their little list, is about 4,130 lines of cuneiform text containing the laws. Hammurabi claims to have been granted his rule in these laws by the gods. Their scope is broad, including criminal, family, property, and commercial law. Modern scholars perceive it as fair with respect for the rule of law in the complexity of old Babylonian society. Don't our politicians always talk about the rule of law? They love that saying. Hammurabi is regarded outside of Syriology as an important figure in the history of law and the document as a true legal code. The U.S. Capitol has a relief portrait of Hammurabi alongside those of other historic lawgivers. There are replicas of the stele, or the stela, in numerous institutions, including the headquarters of the UN in New York and the Pergamon Museum in Berlin, where the altar of Zeus is, the seat of Satan. Then under that law, we have Corpus Juris Civilis, which is a collection of the Code of Justinian from 500 AD by order of the Roman Empire. Then under that, we have the ordinances and the customs of the sea, established by the Venetian black nobility, and then translated into the Black Book of Admiralty, which is a compilation of English Admiralty laws created over the course of several English monarchs, but starting with Eleanor of Aquitaine, who was the Duchess in that Frankish region of France that I've been talking about. Then under that, we have the Amalfian laws, compiled in the 12th century in Amalfi in Italy, where the laws were used to regulate trade and shipping in the Mediterranean Sea. And under that, we have the Hansa, which was a medieval commercial and defensive network of merchant guilds in Europe, which began with German traders aiming to expand their commercial interests. So yikes, but the main one at the top of the Babylonian is the Babylonian one. So the international organizations are the International Maritime Organization based in London, the Committee of Maritime International based in France, London Maritime Arbitrators Association, which is in London, International Association of Classified Societies, founded on September 11th of 1968 in Hamburg, Germany, but headquartered currently in London. So the U.S. Merchant Navy sits under the U.S. So now I'm talking specifically about the U.S. Merchant Navy. It sits under the U.S. Department of Commerce, which is a crown corporation, but the military structure is based on the U.K. Navy or the Royal Navy. So while it might appear a good thing that Trump and Doge are cutting resources for the NOAA and the National Weather Service, I think it's an effort to eliminate some of the regulations and organizations involved at the lower levels and then consolidate the power at the top with the military, merchant navy, commissioned officers, especially since the director of the NOAA placed a gag order on its employees in 2017 to sign a non-disclosure document preventing weather service workers from talking about climate engineering programs. And it seems that since all these changes have been happening with the NOAA and the National Weather Service, we've been having worse weather manipulation because it is indeed a militarized weather situation. Last fall was a record-breaking hurricane season, flooding all over the place, fires. And we already saw in the patents video that we looked at the patent that was used for hurricane manipulation in my patents video. And the U.S. Patent Office is also managed by Serco, which is a crown corporation. So I'm going to play this video that I did last fall about the NOAA now.
Regarding the scheduled, record-breaking, deadly, and devastating October hurricane season, a commenter pointed me towards the Geoengineering Watch organization, which I had seen before but not revisited in a while. In this video, Dane Wigington plays a recording of a phone call to a National Weather Service employee placed by someone that Dane works with. That caller is pointing out that NEXRAD, NEXRAD, which is the National Weather Service radar system, that NEXRAD plays a role in weather modification because it puts out frequencies which can direct the storms to specific locations as a form of geoengineering, along with the aluminum, barium, etc. used to enhance the storms to begin with. In that call, it is confirmed that NEXRADS is operated by the National Weather Service. Okay, so NEXRAD is operated by the National Weather Service. In the video, Dane also points out an illegal federal gag order placed on the National Weather Service and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association personnel, and these are the nation's weathermen. And the next part, I'm sorry, is going to be boring, but it is very relevant, I believe, the organizational structure of this militarized weather situation. So here's the gag order. Here's the gag order, okay? The director of the corporate government agency, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, or the NOAA, I'll refer to them as NOAA going forward, which oversees the National Weather Service. So the NOAA oversees the National Weather Service. So the director of the NOAA, it says, is forcing its employees to sign a non-disclosure document which prevents Weather Service workers from talking about climate engineering programs, such as stratospheric aerosol geoengineering, ice nucleation for weather modification, and solar radiation management. And this is just a reminder that geoengineering patents are on file at the Patent Office. I'll talk about the significance of that a little bit later. So here are the 3 gag orders issued by the National Weather Service, which sits under the parent agency, the NOAA, and the Department of Commerce. These orders forbid the disclosure of information arising out of organizational planning. So it forbids disclosure of anything about the National Weather Service organization workforce analysis. And this has the effect of muzzling any revelations about agency planning and rationale for planned actions. Number 2, grievance settlements, which blocks the release of grievances involving actions by agency managers that constitute violations of law or regulation, waste of funds, mismanagement, or abuse of authority. And number 3, collective bargaining, requiring that all information about the collective bargaining agreement bargaining process must be held confidential. So that gag order is confirmed. So the director of the NOAA has placed a gag on anyone in that organization and anyone in the National Weather Service, which sits under that organization. So the NOAA oversees the National Weather Service, meaning it's over the National Weather Service. The NOAA is a U.S. scientific and regulatory agency charged with forecasting weather, monitoring oceanic and atmospheric conditions, charting the seas, and conducting deep-sea exploration. And that agency is part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. It says the NOAA was officially formed in 1970, and in 2021, the NOAA had almost 12,000 civilian employees. But its research and operations are supported by 320 formed uniformed service members who make up the NOAA Commissioned Corps. The Commissioned Corps is made up of scientifically and technically trained commissioned officers. So commissioned officers. So the top of the NOAA are commissioned officers. And those commissioned officers receive training in leadership and management in addition to training relating to their specific military occupational specialty. It says these positions typically require university degrees as a prerequisite for commissioning, and these apparently usually come from a military academy. It says commissioned officers are considered commanding officers under presidential authority. And in this link, it focuses a lot on the UK as the structure behind this, the British Army, the Royal Navy, the Royal Air Force, etc. Okay? As far as training structure, goes into an explanation also of how that plays into the Commonwealth of Nations. So my point is that this commissioning, these officers that are at the top of this NOAA, that organization is structured, it looks like, from the UK. I'm just saying. All right. So I had just seen that NOAA when I was covering the recent longshoremen strike. So see my videos titled Goodfellas Part 1, 2, and 3, where they hauled out the Goodfella to tell about the port worker strike, which was rolled out at exactly the same time as the hurricane. And in those videos, I was showing the association of the Longshoremen's Association, which is a union organization to the Merchant Navy, which is actually the UK Navy, or sits under them, I would argue. Which in the US, this division is called the Merchant Marines. So the Longshoremen's Association sits under the US Merchant Marines. Guess what else sits under the US Merchant Marines? US Merchant Marines, the NOAA, and the Department of Homeland Security, but let's just focus on the NOAA for now. Let's just focus on the NOAA for now. All right. Let's look at the child agencies listed here. Okay? National Environmental Satellite Data and Information Services. It's got a NASA logo. Fisheries Service, Ocean Service, the National Weather Service. Okay. National Weather Service sits under the NAA. Office of Marine and Aviation Operations. So this could be cloud seeding, I assume. Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research, the NOAA. And the Office of Space Commerce. The Office of Space Commerce. It's got a NASA logo too. Office of Space Commerce is an office within the NOAA, which is part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. And so the parent organization of all these sits under the U.S. Department of Commerce, which is under the executive branch, hence why they refer to as the corporate government agencies. But in the end, it's indeed the Crown Corporation. See my video titled Serco. Serco is a Crown Corporation that also owns the U.S. Patent Office and controls many other agencies, etc. So how intertwined are the U.S. and the U.K. associated groups under the U.S. Department of Commerce, especially those we just talked about, both of which had an integral role in recent events where they rolled out the longshoreman to talk about he's going to do a strike right at the same time that major hurricane is going on. So what was the reason for that? Was it a distraction? Was it setting up for a future event? We don't know, but what we have just proven is that both of those organizations sit under the same parent organization, right? So here's a quote from the U.S. Naval Observatory website regarding that April 8th solar eclipse. And I've talked about this before, but I'm going to talk about it again. Okay? I'm going to talk about it again. Here's the quote right here. This is the quote. I'm going to read it. Nothing there is beyond hope. Nothing can be sworn impossible. Nothing wonderful. Since Zeus, father of the Olympians, made night from midday, hiding the light of the shining sun, and sore fear came upon men. So from there, on their astronomical site of the Navy, you go to the Astronomical Applications Department, and it says it's the official website of the U.S. government. But if you select the Eclipse online portal, it goes here, which is a UK site. The Merchant Marines, the Royal Navy. Why does it go to a UK site? Why are they quoting Zeus? Because they love Zeus, as you can see in their little love poem to him.
So I hope I'm communicating this information well. Basically what I'm showing is that the militarized weather is a joint effort between the UK and the US military, specifically the Merchant Navy, and also the UK and other countries via the Merchant Navy, I assume, which is under Maritime and Admiralty Law, which is based most prominently on Babylonian code that wasn't even found until 1901. The Merchant Navy is not only associated with militarized weather, but also commerce, specifically international commerce. So for the people out there who say focusing on this type of thing is not relevant, but only your own righteousness is relevant, tell that to someone who's had their home flooded or burned to the ground. Thanks for listening.